Well, welcome everyone. Hello again, my name is Stephanie. I'm with the Scientist in Every Florida School program. And today we're stepping into the garden, our virtual field trip series presented by Mounts Botanical Garden and the Scientist in Every Florida School. And today we're actually going to be exploring the benefits of butterfly gardens. Scientist in Every Florida School is a free program that's housed within the Thompson Earth Systems Institute at the University of Florida. And we have a mission to engage K-12 Florida students and teachers in cutting edge research and science role models by providing experiences like today. Our partner, Mounts Botanical Garden, is a nationally acclaimed attraction in the state of Florida, and it is a wonderful place to visit for Florida residents and visitors alike. They have a mission to inspire and educate through nature. I'm going to pass things to my colleague April at Mounts to tell us a little bit about their space now.
Thank you, Stephanie. Welcome everyone to Mounts Botanical Garden. If you can imagine a tropical paradise with ever-changing beauty, a place for relaxation, inspiration, and transformation, then you can imagine what Mounts Botanical Garden is like every day. We have 16 acres that you can explore. We have 25 different display gardens, and each of these gardens is a collection of plants. It's kind of like a zoo, but for plants. So these gardens display what you could plant here in Florida. We have over 5,000 different plant species, and we show you what can grow here in this tropical climate, because it's sometimes a little difficult in this subtropical setting to know what to plant and to have things that will thrive. Mounts Botanical Garden is Palm Beach County's oldest and largest botanical garden. And on the premises, we do have a butterfly garden, and that leads me to introduce our scientist for today, Dr. Emily Kazan. She's going to talk to us about butterfly gardens. Emily?
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here with you all today, and I will share my screen so we can go ahead and get started. All right, so today I'm going to be talking with you all about butterfly gardens, and of course, a lot of relevant information to butterfly gardens is about butterfly biology, so we're going to be mixing that in a little bit. This is a little picture of a tiny budding butterfly garden I have in the front of my home here in Gainesville, Florida. So a little bit about me. I'm Emily Kazan. I just finished my PhD at the University of Florida, and I did my PhD with butterflies in the Colombian Andes. So here I am in this photo, putting up a butterfly trap filled with some rotting fruits, which are really tasty for a lot of butterflies, to try to find out what kind of critters are in this mountainous cloud forest. And my path wasn't always, it wasn't very linear. I didn't always work with butterflies. For my master's degree, which sort of set me up in this trajectory, I studied giant damselflies. I was interested in these huge, you can see how big they are. I have a normal adult-sized face, and they cover most of my face. I was interested in these beautiful creatures that live only in lowland rainforests, and very interested in how they move about their landscape. So can they fly from one spot to another if they have to cross, for example, a cattle pasture? This sort of love for the tropics and love for insects ultimately led me to my PhD, for which I studied interdisciplinary ecology, and I did use a lot of different disciplines in my research. So I was interested in community ecology, so kind of asking which butterflies are where and why. I studied thermal physiology as well, so I tried to understand how butterflies react to temperature extremes and temperature shocks, which is important for understanding how well certain populations are going to survive given climate change and land use change, like deforestation and fragmentation. And I did a little bit about the microbiome. So what kinds of bacteria are living inside of a butterfly gut And how might that change across butterfly species and locations? I was fortunate enough to be associated with the McGuire Center and the Florida Museum of Natural History during my graduate studies at the University of Florida. And this is a great resource for all things natural history and all things about Lepidoptera, so butterflies and moths. And there are tons of great resources about butterflies and native species and native plants that support these species that you can find from the McGuire Center and Florida Museum websites or by visiting. So I highly recommend that if you ever have the chance. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about butterflies and why butterfly gardens are important, how to make the most of them, and how they interact with all of the different life stages of butterflies and moths. So a lot of us are probably pretty familiar with this idea that an adult butterfly lays eggs. Those eggs hatch into caterpillars. Caterpillars eat lots and lots and lots of plant material, and they grow. And the amount of time that something spends as a caterpillar is going to depend on the weather conditions, how nice the plant is that it's eating, and of course, the species that it is. Then those caterpillars turn into chrysalises or they make cocoons, and they undergo a full metamorphosis. So they change from this caterpillar form to an adult butterfly form. And then of course, the cycle repeats itself. So let's take a look at that first stage, butterfly eggs. So these eggs are laid on plants, and they're typically laid on the same plant that caterpillar needs to eat. So we'll talk about it a little bit more, but a lot of you are probably aware that many species of butterfly and moth rely on only one or two species of plants to eat when they're developing. So these eggs are laid on the plant that the caterpillar is going to need to eat. And as you can see here, they come in all different shapes and sizes and textures. And some of them are really cryptic and they're hard to see on a plant, and others, like these red eggs, are extremely obvious. So there's a huge amount of diversity in butterfly and moth eggs. Next, of course, it's time for the caterpillar to pop out. So let's take a look at what those look like. Here are some representations of caterpillars, only a few different kinds of caterpillars, and you can see how much amazing diversity there is. So importantly, this caterpillar, for example, the caterpillar of the great purple hair streak butterfly, looks a whole lot like its host plant. So this is the plant that it's eating, and as you can see, it's kind of hard to tell the difference. Where does the caterpillar start and the plant end, right? Whereas this Atala butterfly, the caterpillar of which is toxic, is very apparent. So this is giving a warning to any predators saying, hey, I'm red, you probably don't want to eat me because the plant I've been eating as a caterpillar gives me some toxins which are not nice for predators like birds to eat. So the plants that are available to caterpillars are important, first of all, because they can provide some camouflage for the caterpillar. Also, because sometimes caterpillars need specific chemicals as defenses against predators, which only certain plants have, and to allow for their proper development into an adult butterfly. Here we have some Luna moths, which I reared, and you can see they started as little tiny caterpillars, and they grew into quite large caterpillars, ultimately really big moths, and they eat only sweet gum trees. So if you want to make sure you have Luna moths in your neighborhood, that you have to make sure that you also have sweet gum trees for the adults to lay their eggs on and for the caterpillars to eat. And I will tell you, these caterpillars eat a lot of plant material. It's really quite impressive. So before a caterpillar can come out and become a butterfly, it has to undergo metamorphosis, like we talked about before. And once again, the plants that are available are super important for that to happen successfully. Here we see some examples of chrysalises and cocoons. This one, for example, I bet a lot of you think it looks just like a little branch that broke off from this tree. But if you look really closely, you can see some silk threads that the caterpillar created to anchor itself to a tree. And this is extremely intentional, that this chrysalis looks like it has some moss on it. The color is uneven, just like the bark of this tree, because this butterfly in particular is associated with trees that look like this in lowland rainforests. And so they use that to their advantage to be really hidden from predators. Likewise, this chrysalis looks just like an immature leaf of this plant. Again, if you look closely, you can see it's not actually a leaf, even though it looks like it. It has leaf veination and everything, but there's a tiny bit of silk here that is, again, anchoring that chrysalis to a leaf. And finally, from those same Luna moths we saw before, here is a cocoon. So the Luna moth caterpillar can also create silk, and it curled a bunch of leaves around itself and sort of sewed them together with its silk to have a safe place to metamorphose into an adult. Okay, finally, we have the very fun adult stage, and this is the most charismatic stage of the butterfly. As I mentioned, I reared out those Luna moths, so we can watch a moth emerging, and butterflies emerge in the same way. They come out and they have to inflate their wings. So let's watch that happen. This video is sped up, and you can see this moth is inflating its wings with basically the equivalent of insect blood. And then it's going to go ahead and fly away. And this, we'll watch it one more time because it's so cool. This moth is then going to fly right to a sweet gum tree. She's going to hope to mate, and she's going to lay her eggs on the sweet gum tree because that is the plant associated with this moth. So here we see several examples of adult butterflies feeding, and the majority, and here's a moth as well. And these are primarily feeding on nectar, so the sugary water that's inside of flowers of plants. Here again, we have a butterfly actively feeding, and you can see the proboscis, or the tongue of this butterfly, is going in and out of the flower, absorbing nectar, because that sugar water is really nice food for butterflies. Some butterflies don't only eat nectar, they don't only drink up the nectar from flowers, they also feed on pollen. So this is a picture of a heliconius butterfly, and all of these white specks on its proboscis are grains of pollen. And that pollen is very rich in proteins, and so it's a really good and important food source for this group of butterflies. These are special butterflies in that they have enzymes in their saliva which allow them to digest pollen. And again, that's a bit more nutritious than nectar, and so they tend to be longer lived. And also, pollen is an important resource to have for these butterflies. So here we see an example of an adult butterfly, an adult monarch feeding on a milkweed, and on that same plant, there is a caterpillar of the same species. So here we're saying how one plant can support all of the life stages of this very charismatic butterfly. So I've talked a lot about the reliance on plants at different life stages, and we can talk a bit about best practices for making a butterfly garden to ensure that you're giving all of the diversity of butterflies the resources they need to survive and thrive in your yard. So first of all, it's important to provide a variety of shapes and colors of flowers. So you can see here, there's all kinds of shapes and colors available, all kinds of native plants that come in different shapes and sizes and colors. And this can attract different kinds of butterflies. So we saw some butterflies like to feed on nectar, others on pollen, and this diversity of plants is going to make sure that all different kinds of resources that butterflies need are available to them. Also, some butterflies are attracted to some colors and shapes and others are attracted to others. So this ensures that you can bring in and attract a really broad diversity of butterflies. Of course, we talked about how important plants are to the different life stages. So providing larval host plants, so the plants that caterpillars must eat in order to survive and develop, and also nectar and pollen sources for adults. So there are some plants, for example, this passion flower that can provide both. Others, that Luna moth example, a sweet gum tree will provide the larval food. You'll need flowers to bring in other life stages. Also, because flowers are so important for maintaining adult butterflies and attracting adult butterflies, it's important to try to have flowers that are blooming throughout the growing season. So different plants tend to bloom at different times. There are a lot of plants that bloom in early spring, a lot of plants that bloom in the fall, and some plants that bloom in between. So if you can plant your garden and strategically choose plants to make sure you have flowers throughout the year, that will make sure you have lots of resources available for butterflies across the whole growing season so that they can come to your garden and feed and reproduce at any point during their flying season. Also, more about sort of the diversity of plants. It's important to practice intercropping. So to make sure that you have, if you have a small area of plants, that it's not just one single species of plant. You can see here there are lots of different types, colors, shapes of flowers. And here in a small area, so that a butterfly could feed from one species of flower and then another species of flower without moving too far. This again is going to make sure that there's plentiful food available for adult butterflies, especially when it's in close proximity to a host plant. You're going to promote a lot of diversity of both species of butterflies and life stages, so you can help to propagate more and more butterflies. And another really important point when creating a butterfly garden, especially here in Florida and with the botanical gardens as a resource, there's no excuse not to, and that is to include lots of native plants or local or regional ecotypes. So when you're looking for plants to plant a garden and you're purchasing them, be sure to ask whoever you're buying them from where the plants come from and if they're Florida natives. This is important for a number of reasons. First of all, native plants are going to be most likely to host native butterflies. Butterflies have adapted and evolved over lots and lots of time in the same place as these plants. So keeping that, that matchup is really important. Also, we don't want our native diversity to get overtaken by non-native diversity. And some non-native plants have a tendency to spread far and wide. So native diversity is most important for both the plant communities, the animal communities, and sort of everyone's general well-being. And I'd like to highlight one plant in particular, which is my favorite, and that is the passion vine. These plants have some of the most beautiful flowers I know. They're so complex and gorgeous. And it is the host plant for some really great butterflies, including the Gulf fritillary, which we see here, one of their caterpillars, and here is an adult. And also this same plant, of which there are many varieties in the state of Florida, is the host plant of the Florida state butterfly, the zebra longwing. So planting local native passion vine is not only great for your senses because the flowers are beautiful and the fruits are tasty, but it's a native plant that hosts a lot of native butterfly diversity, and I can't recommend it enough. So with that, I'd like to thank you all so much for inviting me, and I will happily take any questions or concerns or comments about butterflies and their development and their plants and plants of choice. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Emily. That was really amazing. You're such a great communicator and shared such great information with our group of students on the call. While we wait for some questions to roll in, I'll go ahead and kick things off with a couple of questions for you. Kind of going back to your research, how often would you end up traveling down to South America and to the Amazon to do your research?
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to go to Colombia, I believe it was 3 times to conduct research for 2 to 3 months at a time. So I had to get a lot done each time I went.
How long would you stay down in the Amazon to do your
about between 2 and 3 months each time I went.
Wow.
Yeah.
Incredible. So we have a question from a group who wants to know which butterflies are native to Florida.
Oh boy, there are a lot of butterflies native to Florida. I have a list, but it's in the other room. But there are butterflies of pretty much all groups that are native to here. I highlighted a few. I guess I could share my screen again. I should have not unshared. So these are 2 species that are commonly found here. So this is a long-tailed skipper and a monarch. There are many, all of the butterflies that I highlighted in my presentation can be found here in Florida. So I would suggest to whoever asked that question to look up through the McGuire Center to find a comprehensive list, because it will take me till the end of the hour to list all of those species.
I hear you. I'll try to get that into the chat box before we leave here today. Speaking of Florida butterflies, are there any that have adapted to changes in the environment that you all have witnessed or seen? In particular, are any using non-native plants now for eating or what have you?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So here in Florida, we have a really strange phenomenon with monarch butterflies. There is a lot of debate in the scientific community as to what's happening and why. But part of what's happening is that there are some not so native types of milkweed, which is the host plant for monarchs, that are planted here in Florida. And so that's why it's really important when you're buying, especially things like milkweed that are really you're pretty much buying to help promote monarch butterflies. It's important to have native species. So some scientists argue that those monarchs that eat the tropical milkweed, which is not typically found, at least in North Florida, that causes a lack of migratory behavior. So we have kind of year-round monarchs here in Florida. And as I said, some people sort of blame that on this non-native milkweed. I can't think of any great examples off the top of my head of other adaptations or other plants. Those things happen extremely slowly. So changes in host plant or changes in color or changes in behavior at a true population level happen super slowly. And so sometimes, unfortunately, we don't have great before data, and we have good data once things have changed. And so it's hard to say if they've changed or not. But I'm sure in addition to this, this monarch issue that I brought up, there almost definitely are some changes in timing with respect to migration of some species. Some species are semi-migratory, which means they kind of move a little bit. So I'm sure there are changes in that. With respect to host plants, I don't know of anything other than the monarch example I gave.
It's great though to know. I've seen the giant milkweed, for example, which I don't believe is native to Florida, for sale at some of the nurseries around here in West Palm Beach. So good to know. With regard to color, you mentioned that they might choose plants by their color or shape, and that's how they know to go to the plant of choice. How do butterflies see? Is it in color, or is there some other mechanism that their eyes use?
That is a fantastic question. And there's a lot of ongoing research just in general on on insect eyes. And I will preface this by saying I'm absolutely not an expert. I know much more about odonate, dragonfly, and damselfly vision than butterfly vision. But my educated guess is that indeed there's plenty of color being picked up by butterflies. That's why they're so colorful. That's why part of the reason they go to colorful flowers. So yes, they're picking up on color. They're picking up on colors that we don't even know about and see. A lot of butterflies. So we see in the visual light spectrum, we see all the colors of the rainbow. Butterflies are also seeing in ultraviolet. So a flower that looks yellow to us might look purple and white to a butterfly because there's all kinds of UV reflectance that our eyes don't pick up. So yes, color, lots of color, and color we don't even see.
Excellent. You had shown some really amazing pictures of various butterflies and their diversity. And you mentioned that the Atala caterpillar, I'm sorry, caterpillars, not butterflies, the actual caterpillar form. And you mentioned that the Atala, it has toxins based off of what they eat and has that bright red color. Thank you.
Yes.
I think you're putting that picture back up there.
Yeah.
So for a bird, that would be a signal not to eat it. For people, is there any caterpillar that is poisonous or toxic to touch?
Yeah, there are several. That's a good question as well. So, and I don't have an exhaustive list of which are painful to the touch and which are not. My general rule is if it looks hairy, probably don't touch it. There are some caterpillars. There's one whose species name is escaping me, but people called it the Donald Trump caterpillar because it kind of had this orange hair that looked really silly. And I know those, for example, which can be found in Central America, can cause really unpleasant, almost like chemical burns if you touch them. So yes, if you see a really fuzzy caterpillar that looks like it might hurt if you touch it, it probably will hurt if you touch it. So it is best to admire them from a little bit of a distance and maybe don't poke them. Even if it's not dangerous to poke for yourself, poking a caterpillar might not be the nicest thing for the caterpillar.
Gotcha. Now, when they do change to butterflies or even moths, for instance, is it true that they no longer have mouth parts?
Wow, these are really fantastic questions. So in some cases, that's true. So for this Luna moth, for example, of course, they have mouth parts as caterpillars. We can see them. We can see this caterpillar munching on a sweet gum leaf, but that's true. As adults, they do not have mouth parts for this moth. Other butterflies that I showed you, however, very clearly do have mouth parts and they do eat as adults. So the proboscis on this is definitely a mouth part, and this butterfly is drinking nectar from this flower. So that depends on the species.
Great, that's great to know. The picture that you had shown of all the caterpillar eggs and the variety of shapes and colors, and even the way that they were laying the eggs, why is it that some of them lay their eggs in such unique ways, like that long, tall column, for example? Why would they do that, do you think?
Yeah, so some butterflies are going to lay their eggs just one at a time. And that could be to give their caterpillar the best chance of surviving, right? So if you have one egg on one plant, then theoretically, when that caterpillar comes out, it has that whole plant to eat. It doesn't have to compete with any of its brothers and sisters for food. Alternatively, there's another strategy, maybe like we're seeing here and here in these pictures, which is that a butterfly lays a whole bunch of eggs thinking, okay, I'm going to lay 30 eggs, at least a couple of these caterpillars are going to survive and be fine, right? So the idea that you have a lot of things in one area, even if a few get eaten by predators, a predator can't can't possibly eat all of them. This crazy line of eggs, there's got to be some evolutionary answer to that question. And I am genuinely not clear what that is. I think it's so cool and so fascinating that they can lay eggs in such a weird orientation. But I imagine that has more to do with the adult butterfly morphology. So how that butterfly looks when it's laying its eggs and the body parts it has and how they're kind of put together. I think it probably has quite a bit to do with that. But yeah, it's
fascinating.
Whoever asked that question, I suggest that they go into graduate school and do a really cool study about how different groups of butterflies lay eggs and see if we can find out some patterns about that and why it might happen, because that's a really interesting question.
Truly. I think probably perhaps one of the things I take away from your presentation today is all of the unique ways and diversity in different butterflies for cocooning and laying their eggs. I think it's really fascinating that they have the ability to know how to blend in or camouflage with their environment or protect themselves from competition amongst each other or predators. So very, very cool presentation. And I thank you for that today. I'm going to ask you one more question. It's actually two parts. And then we're going to go ahead and close our event for the day. But my first part question is, what is your favorite butterfly? And the second question is, what advice would you give for anybody who is fascinated with butterflies, moths, damselflies after hearing your talk? How could they learn more or perhaps get into the field?
Yeah, so my favorite butterfly, that's a really hard one because there's so many and they're so beautiful. And truly, butterflies are one of the most diverse groups of animals in the world. And I was fortunate to work in Colombia, which is the most biodiverse country in the world, and it has the most butterflies in the world. And so too many to choose from. But I might go with blue morphos, the really big iridescent blue butterflies that you can see at the Florida Museum of Natural History. And then they look kind of like owls when they close their wings. They're just really magical. And when you see them, you know you're in the midst of a really nice tropical forest. So yeah, I love them. And you asked how might folks learn more if they're really keen on butterflies or damselflies or anything? Well, as I mentioned, the Florida Museum of Natural History and the McGuire Center are really great resources. So the butterfly garden there and the collections are amazing. And there's tons of wonderful scientists that work there that love talking to people about what they do. There are plenty of books for all ages about insect identification and insect natural history. I go out with my 3-year-old niece and I try to identify bugs with her children's book. And then I have my own, kind of grown-up guidebooks. So just getting out there, getting out even in your backyard, these critters are absolutely everywhere, and opening your eyes and just watching things, just staring at a bug sounds maybe boring, but can be one of the most fascinating things you can do. And it's available to everybody just right in their backyard.
Good point. So we've had a number of questions that have come in, and if you're okay with it, I might send these to you via email and then email them off to the teachers, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. That I appreciate that, and I know they will too. I'm going to go ahead and take the screen back here for a brief moment just to wrap things up. You can learn more about Mounts Botanical Gardens, butterflies, the CEFS programs by visiting the websites you see here on your screen. As Dr. Kazan mentioned, we are part of the Florida Museum of Natural History, and this great butterfly forest that we have there is worth visiting. It's a wonderful place to learn more about nature and all of the great things we have around us. You can follow us again on social media. Our YouTube channel will have this recording along with K-12 extension activities available. And it will be again housed on our YouTube channel there for you to view at any time. This actually wraps up our spring season of Into the Garden. We'll be working on some new programming for the fall, and we sure hope to see you then. So everyone take care, have a great rest of your school year, and goodbye. Thank you.